Good afternoon. My name is Ravi Pense, and I have the privilege and honor to serve as Vice President and Chief Information Officer here at Brown University, which means I work for all of you. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our distinguished lecture series, Leadership in Technology. The goal of this series is to bring to the campus transformational technology leaders who will share their vision of the future of technology, and will also allow us to engage in a dialogue with our amazing students, many of whom are here, our world-renowned faculty, many of whom are here as well, and our innovative and dedicated staff. Let me ask you a very simple question. Did you use your smartphone today to look something up, or to pay for that cup of coffee you bought, or to download some music from Spotify or one of the online music services? And if I asked you to raise that hand, I'm sure most of the hands in this room will go up. The reason I'm asking that question is, if you did any of those things, chances are some of the data that you consumed came from devices that were manufactured by EMC. Our speaker today has been the chairman of EMC since 2006 and CEO since 2001. And he's been one of the most recognized CEOs in the country and world. He has received the Best CEO Award from Barron's in 2011 and 2012. A lot of the information about his accomplishments are in the bio that you received, but I wanted to tell you some things that are not in his bio. It turns out Joe, at once upon a time, actually played in minor league baseball as a catcher and had actually dreams of becoming a major league player. A knee injury, unfortunately, ended those dreams, so he did the next best thing. He became the CEO. He can now probably buy a team if he wants to, okay? He's going to be speaking to us about cloud and big data. To put that in perspective, I want to share with you a quote by Eric Schmidt, the executive chairman of Google. And the quote goes something like this, and I'm paraphrasing some. From the dawn of civilization until about 2003, humankind, all of us included, generated 5 exabytes of data. That data is generated today in 2 days. Every 2 days, we are generating 5 exabytes of data. Most children have digital presence even before they're born. If you're wondering how, I'm not talking about the excited parents who are putting things on the Facebook, but I'm talking about sonograms that exist in digital, have a digital presence. And it is amazing what's happening. The data is all around us, and it's time we learn a little bit more about that data. So it's my distinct pleasure and honor to introduce Joe Tucci, an amazing CEO, a caring and a compassionate leader, and a good friend. Joe, would you please come up?
Well, thank you, Ravi. That was a most kind introduction. I had a misspent youth, as you can guess, but it is really good to be here. I love being with young people. I love being with smart people, and the blend of the faculty and the students we have here is just a terrific honor. So, Ravi, thank you for inviting me. Obviously, today we're going to talk a lot about information technology, and I'll make a statement which I don't think any of you will disagree with. But I would challenge you to think of any area of anything in life where you can get significant productivity gains, significant innovation without using information technology. And information technology is indeed a key contributor to business agility, which is going to differentiate the businesses of tomorrow that are going to be successful versus the businesses of yesterday that are going to go through dramatic change and disruption, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Now, Ravi did most of this for me, and you can see that here's the exabyte, the one in the 18 you were right on, and now we're measuring in zettabytes, and you can see this study here, which was done, you probably can't read that, but it was done by some Berkeley, sorry about that, but it was done by some great faculty in Berkeley, and they came up with this digital universe study. And they basically say that a zettabyte is equal to all the grains of sand in the world on all the coastlines. And I couldn't help but wonder, how do they know that? I mean, how the heck do they know that? But that's what they say, so who am I to disagree? And of course, they now, when I entered this industry, just to age myself, the biggest thing we were talking about was megabytes, and now we're talking about zettabytes, and indeed, we're even talking, they've invented the next word, which is yottabyte, and that's kind of an unimaginable amount of data. So here's the latest stat. And this study was just done, again, you can't see all the press, but this study was just done in 2014. And they actually updated how fast information is being created. So they went back to the year 2000, and they said in the year 2000, the whole year, 2 exabytes. Everybody here was alive in 2000, right? So that whole year, the big we, created 2 exabytes of data. And now the digital universe is doing 5 times that much in a day. So it's pretty amazing. And if you put that in zettabyte terms, last year we produced 4.4 zettabytes. A lot of grains of sand. And the amazing news about this study is that they say in the next 7 years, between the end of 13, which is when they measured, to 2020, that information will increase 10 times, tenfold in the next 7 years. So it's an amazing amount of data. And I know what you must be thinking is, this guy is in a great business because he's storing all that data. His company is, maybe, we'll see. Now, I put it in real terms. This I know is fact, that I was relying on great research science. Now, if you think of those research scientists that did it, what gives me heart that they might be right, and probably are right, is besides being very smart, learned people, they did a study back in 2000. And when I look at it, and they did several intermediate studies, and their predictions of how much data that was going to be created were remarkably close, remarkably close. So when they say there'll be 44 zettabytes information created by in 2020, I don't doubt them. Now this is EMC, and this is fact. We store more data than anybody else. Obviously, there's tremendous amounts of data we don't store. But EMC got onto storage, and its first storage device storage array was introduced to the market in 1990. So if you take all the years, 1990, 91, 92, 93, 94, and you go all the way up to 2005, that total 15-year period was 1 exabyte shipped, that total period. If you just fast forward a few years later, in 2010, we had our first exabyte year, and then you see things really starting to accelerate, because in 2011, we had our first exabyte quarter. And we think very shortly we'll have our first exabyte week, and if the study's right, we'll be having to prepare for exabyte days. So it's pretty amazing, and this is factual, what we actually did ship. Now what's creating all this, driving all this data deluge? Right? And Robbie gave you one of them, we are. Right? And a lot of it's being generated on our mobile devices. I mean, how many of you took a picture of something today, or a video clip of something today, or used your mobile phone to buy a cup of coffee today? It's really interesting. This morning, I was in Boston last night, and when I got up this morning, I went down, before I got in my car to drive into Hopkinton, I went to Starbucks to get a cup of coffee. And there was probably 10 people in line in front of me. Some were older, most were younger. And I was the only guy that paid with cash. There was a kind of a mix of Starbucks credit cards and their iPhones, or Android phones. And I was the only guy that paid for cash. And I said, wow, I'm not setting a very good technology example here, but I got my coffee. And it probably took me the longest to get the change and check out. The others were much faster, so I got to get with it, I guess. But at any rate, there's a phenomenon coming here that if you looked at mobile, and mobile's going to drive connected things more than any other technology. You agree with me, right, professors? And all right, there. I'm getting a thumbs up. I'm checking with the heads of the engineering and IT here. Computer science, I should say. So if you think of this connected things phenomena, and you go back to the 4.4 zettabytes that were created last year, and you see that that's going to equal 27% of the digital universe, right? That would tell you 2.5 times as much data is going to be created in several years from now than was created in all of last year, just on the back of this thing called the Internet of Things. Is that, if I was some of your students' age, if that smells like opportunity to you, I think it should smell like opportunity. The other thing that's another fact is, obviously, if you're going to have this much data, you got to definitely be able to store it, process it, move it at a much lower cost, much lower cost. And this is where the cloud computing technologies and these software-defined technologies are changing the world here. So again, another point, if you look at last year, 20% was touched in some way or form by a cloud. It could be a private cloud in a company or an educational institution, or it could be one of the big public clouds. Less than 20%. That goes to 40%. That's 4 times as much data as all the data that was created last year. So pretty amazing. Smells like opportunity again. Another phenomenon is all around this big data, which I'm going to talk most about today, is if there is this huge deluge of data, this 4.4 zettabytes growing to 44 zettabytes, why? What are we going to do with all that data? And basically what businesses want to do is, how do I capture that data, reason over it, and act upon it in real time to change the course of something you're going to do as an individual, or some mechanical device is going to do as an electromechanical device is going to do. Right? And that's the root of the whole big data phenomenon. We'll talk about that. And if you look at things that are driving that, it's everything. Right? This just gives some facts. You can read across them yourself. This is geophysical exploration. This is smart grids. This is video surveillance, medical imaging, gene sequencing. And you can just see how these things just weren't done several years ago, and how much data each of these, you can pick your favorite data point, how much information is being created. And a lot of this is Internet of Things data. A lot of this is human-generated data in terms of, say, smart grids. What are you keeping your thermostat at, how much energy you're using in your house, and if I measure that every 15 minutes and then change, use computer technology to rejigger my smart grid, I can have a lot more effectiveness, a lot more efficiency, be a lot more green, but you can see how much more data it does generate. The other thing, that the fourth trend that's changing IT technology is social networking. It is absolutely changing the way humans interact with other humans, and more it will affect the way humans interact with things. And I'll use, that's on the back of that technology, it'll be how things interact with things. And I'll give you some examples of this, but it's basically changing. I always tell a story, and it's just a true story. I had 2 of my nephew and a niece at a dinner, and they were literally sitting across the table from each other, and they're both sitting down like that. So I said, hey, why don't you just talk? And I said, who are you texting? And they were texting each other. I said, you realize your cousin's right across from you, but went over their head. But at any rate, I am, as sure as I'm standing here, I am highly confident that these 4 macro trends are going to drive all the changes in IT, right? Everything around mobility, everything around big data, social networking, and cloud technology will change computing and drive what we're calling the 3rd platform of IT. The first platform being mainframe and minis, second platform being client-server, PC, and this platform being defined by these 4 technologies. Now, there is one very important enabling technology, critical underpinning technology, and that is all around security, and I could get really complex and say security and privacy. And those 2 things, security and privacy, are first cousins, but very, very different things. Because I would venture a guess, if I took a poll in this room, we would agree rationally on what's in bounds and what's out of bounds from a security point of view. But I would think, depending on age, depending on other factors, I would say we disagree violently on what's private and what's not private and what the rules of privacy should be. So there'll be more swings there. But this is just looking at the security side. If we can't get basic information security, and this was from a couple of weeks ago, the hacks of celebrity files. Last week it was a big retailer that got hacked. But you can't pick up. Almost every week there's a major cycle, and this is critically important. And so I would say the 4 technologies I talked about are going to be the drivers, but this is going to be a critical success factor, and in some ways gate how fast these technologies come into place and change our lives. So I want to talk about a little bit about this dawn of big data and everything that's happening in this world. Not everything that's happening, but some of the factors that's happening. If you think about, I'll go over here a little bit. If you think about the way most decisions are made today in enterprises, whether it be a university, whether it be a business like EMC has, we take our data and we put it in a traditional database. Those are the three big vendors, Oracle, IBM, and SQL Server from Microsoft. And basically, you're scrubbing data, you're putting it in a database, and you got rows and columns. It's expensive, so you be careful what you put in a database, and there's different ways to mine it and get great value. Now, it turns out that structured data is only about 1/5 of a company's data. It turns out that structured data is ergo 4/5, and that structured data is growing 4 times as fast as unstructured. Unstructured data is growing 4 times as fast as structured. So therefore, I would thank a lot of institutions and businesses for storing all that data. But if it's not important, why are you storing it? And if it is important, why aren't you using it to make decisions? And that's what this dawn of big data is all about. It's about how do I not only use my structured data, which is important and will remain important, but how do I use all this unstructured data to make better decisions? And then, of course, it doesn't start there, because most data is not in your 4 walls, right? It could be with a partner. So very important, if you're a bank, you want to go maybe to Fiserv and get credit data. You might want to get forecasting data if you're in a number of industries. Like if you're going to take people out to an oil platform like we saw before, you probably want to check the seas and the weather. You want shipping data. Anybody that's ordering anything on Amazon, immediately you get links to your shipping data. There's locational data. Where am I? Right? I mean, kind of the key to Uber, right? Locational data. Now, none of these data is owned by you. It's owned by a partner. So you not only want to make decisions on your structured, but you want to use your unstructured, then you want to use your partner's data. Partner's data is 90% unstructured. And then you also want to go into public sources, because these public sources, what people say about your business or you on Twitter can change your life. Right? If you're a company, you want to follow that. And that's highly unstructured. So if you're sitting here in a modern world, today you're making most of your decisions based on what you put here, and what you want to do in the future is how do I do here, 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 here. So therefore, in the proliferation, this data dwarfs your data. This data triply dwarfs that data. So these are huge amounts of data sources that you want to use to make good decisions. But if you do it correctly, unbelievable things can happen. And the key here is what you really want to do is you want to turn, and I'll start with an individual. What I'd like to do is catch Robbie in the act of actually wanting to do something, and then influence, positively hopefully, influence what he's doing, which will give him a much better experience and make some money for me, right? And I used Uber before. Everybody was nodding their head. Isn't that exactly what Uber's doing for you? I mean, instead of going down the street and hailing a cab, which say in a city like New York and it's rainy, it could be quite a harrowing experience, you can sit in a dry lobby, order a cab, you know exactly when it's coming, you know exactly who's driving it, and you have an exact price of what it's going to cost you, right? I've never taken a cab in New York City from one location to another and got the same price, ever. I don't know how that happens, but it's true. So again, what have they done? They've done exactly what I've told you. They've caught somebody in the act of doing something, and then in real time, they're using lots of data sources. They're changing the way. And again, they're using locational data, their own data, and changing an experience and disrupting an entire industry, delivery industry, right? So it just kind of shows you how this works in the new world. The other thing that's happening, I talked about it before, is it's not only how you interact with other humans or your own data, it's how do you interact with the Internet of Things. As telemetry, sensors get built into everything imaginable, you know, from what you're wearing to what you'll put on your wrist that'll monitor tremendous amount of health issues or hopefully prevent health issues, to and I'll give you some experience coming up. So basically, this is what's happening to you. So it's not only dealing with what you did before, it's doing all these new sensors that are coming into play. I just showed you the dramatic growth in those sensors and the Internet of Things kind of data, and just tremendous opportunity. So again, if you're sitting here and you're young, all this is saying, wow, what an opportunity. And it's going to change every life, and this technology will disrupt almost every single industry, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we go forward. So at any rate, I could give you examples. This is kind of, I pulled this from another thing, and we could talk about any and all. I did a little example on Uber. But rather than dwell, this is where we see and where we are involved even with companies in these different sectors who are changing their business models using this new advent of big data, which of course is connected to the mobile, which is connected to what's happening in cloud computing and what's happening in social networking, of course with a high degree of security. Now, Mark Andreessen, now this is where we can all get together here. Now, Mark Andreessen is a good friend of mine, by the way, and he's very smart. And he's saying over the next 10 years, he expects almost every industry to be disrupted by world-beating, now here's where we're going to disagree, Mark and I, Silicon Valley companies doing, software. This is these software-defined business models, just like I mentioned with Uber doing delivery. We'll talk about more coming up, right? And I'll submit to you, this does not have to happen in the Silicon Valley. This can happen right here in Providence with the brain power that's right here, probably in this room and certainly in this great university. So there's just opportunities every place. I do agree with his statement. I don't think it's going to be focused on a Silicon Valley. Totally. Well, is that a hotbed and is that on fire? Yes, it is. The interesting thing, this came from a CEO survey. The leaders of companies are now getting it. They're saying, okay, I've seen what's happening, and I believe Mark Andreessen's statements. I believe some of the data I just talked to you about, they believe this data. More and more I find myself getting invited into board meetings to say, can you talk to us about this board and how this might disrupt our industry and some of the new technologies. So it really is getting, the corner office attention and there on down and from the bottom up. And I see it changing both ways, bottom up, top down. And those are always the best way to have changes. If you have both happening, you're going to get a change about anything the fastest. Now, I'll talk to you about a company later that we started that's working totally on big data called Pivotal. And Jeff Elmett's a good friend. And they're, for instance, in everything GE builds, they're going to put sensors in it. So what they're doing, if you know anything about an engine or a plane, planes and engines are totally maintained on hours. At several hundred hours, you do this. At several thousand hours, you do that, right? Whether it needs it or not. So by putting sensors in it, they can do several things. One is they'll know exactly what services an engine needs, when it needs it. So when that plane lands, they'll have the right kind of technical support there. They'll have the right parts there. And they're going to service engines, power, and he's going to sell these engines rather than whatever the price is per engine, power by the hour, and guarantee, and if he does a better job, there's more money for them to make. If they do a worse job, they'll get hurt. But these sensors will give them a tremendous benefit. Also, it gives the industry a great benefit. By monitoring these engines, there's a 1% increase in fuel is $2 billion for the industry. So if you're continually monitoring that engine, even when it's running, right? Now, it's a tremendous amount of, and if you're a G, you're sitting there saying, I'm going to give part of it, it's good for my profits, and of course we're going to share, and our customers are going to get this great benefit too. Now, each engine on a transatlantic flight, there's about 12 to 20 terabytes of information per engine per so if you fly from here to London, you're going to get, and you have 2 engines, you'll get at least probably 30 terabytes of data. And you take that across all the planes in the world, there's a tremendous amount of information that they got to plow through. And actually, when we launched this company, Pivotal, GE actually owns 10% of that company because they not only want to use that kind of technology, they want to get really close to the people that are developing it, and you can't get closer than being an owner. You all see this. Right now, you all have car insurance, I assume. Everybody have a car? Anybody too young to have a car? No, everybody's got a car. And basically, your car rates are what? where do you live? Do you live in a city where there's high crime? How many accidents have you had? How many speeding tickets have you had, right? That's what generates your rate. Has nothing to do with how you actually drive. You could have 2 accidents and been incredibly unlucky, but you're actually a pretty good driver. But your rates are going to be high. So what Progressive's doing is they're basically putting one of these things, which you really don't need because it's in every GPS anyhow. So the smart cars, and all cars are smart cars now, you can really connect. And they can actually, with your permission, say, if you share this data with me and you are a good driver, now I'm not sharing this information with them. I'm telling you that right now. I drive way too fast. But if you are a good driver and a safe driver and you want a lower rate, and you share that information, you're going to get a lower rate. So you can see, so how much data do you think that is going to generate? So I'm just kind of giving you dimensions and how it changes industries. And what's going to happen, by the way, if you're like me and you like to drive fast, eventually my rates are going to go up because I won't share the data. It's going to be an opt-in program, but if you don't opt in, somehow, I think over time, my guess, I have no inside information, but my guess is my rates will go up. But I'm still not sharing the data. I was in a Tesla factory. Now this is like, where's Waldo? You know, what's missing here? Do you see any people there? There actually is one person I found. Where is these? Does anybody see him? There is a person in here someplace. Where? Wherever the heck. There he is. Right? So this just gives you the, I mean, this is a tremendously advanced factory, right? And it's eerie. There's not a lot of people in it, right? But it's tremendously automated, and it turns out that robots don't make as many mistakes. They don't strike. Right? So, but it's changing the way jobs are created, right? In the future, the factories of the future, there'll be less of the old kind of manufacturing jobs, but a whole lot more of new kinds of jobs. So basically, it's going to put a huge burden on all of us, and especially in learning institutions, to how do we train differently in the future. We had a great discussion about this today, and I said the world needs this big time. Locally in Boston, there's Genome Bridge, as part of the Broad Institute, is basically going to sequence millions of pairs of, obviously slice names off, and what treatments people got. And this is going to lead to much more personalized medicine, to saying, I know with this kind of information, this is a huge big data problem. More is not better, maybe less is not better, but certain different genetic makeups with certain kind of treatments are going to have optimum performance. And by finding those optimum performance, we're all going to live healthier lives. So I could go on and on and on. I shouldn't put up Harvard, I guess, when I'm at Brown, right? But I went to Columbia, so I'm okay too. But at any rate, I don't know if you saw this, but Harvard Business Review, so it must be so, said that the data scientist is going to be the sexiest jobs of the 21st century. Because obviously people that know how to deal with this information in mass, right, and can help change the course of an action you're going to take, or change the course of an action of a machine, are going to find out that the world is going to be their oyster, as to age myself with an old saying. And this, I'm not going to ask you to look at this, but this is just a bunch of data that we pulled together, and this says there's a wicked shortage of this talent, a tremendous shortage, and this talent is going to have a shortage probably for the next decade if we get on it today. So one of my pleadings, which has nothing to do with us, but everything to do with the future, we got to create jobs and knowledge and the ready workforce where the jobs are going to be, and there's going to be a tremendous number of jobs here. So yes, there probably will be less factory workers as we go to the factories of the future, but boy, there's going to be a whole lot more knowledge workers. Now, I want to close because I want to get close to education, but I was listening to the radio one day, and this fellow that was being interviewed said, the eights are killing us. And he said, what the heck is that? The eights are killing us. He said, there's 3 things that are just eating our lunch in terms of cost and price. And if you're especially if you're local, state and local government, or even a federal government, or government, not federal government of any country in the world, the eights are killing it. And the first 8 is the Medicaid. So you can see This is the line of CPI, and you can see healthcare is well over 2 times CPI. Been that way for a while, and unfortunately those lines are separating. Educate is killing us twice as much, right? Here's CPI, this is the cost to educate. The third 8 is incarcerate, which is the worst 8 of all. And you can see how, here's the CDP. And of course, in a way, they're all related. Because if I don't educate properly and I get people unemployed, I'm going to get more crime, right? Busy, productive people are much less apt. Not that white-collar crime is not in vogue, so to speak, unfortunately, and there is white-collar crime, but as all these hacks prove. But again, people who don't have jobs, who don't see themselves in the future. So if you look, so if you're in a government anywhere at any level, you know these 8s are really hurting you, and are hurting us as citizens. And I submit that the way to bend any of these curves, because we've got to bend these curves on educate, incarcerate, and medicate down, right? Hopefully you can pick CPI up, but it's probably a better course to bend the red curve, is going to be these new business models using information. I mean, and so, you know, here at Brown University, one of the premier universities and learning institutions in the world, right? You have a role, you have a duty to how do we help. And then, of course, you're not going to be immune yourself. I was at a conference recently, and I was sitting next to Sebastian, who started Udacity, and he ran a course, a physics course. They had 160,000 students. And interestingly, the top 30 students, he was telling me, only 5 of them, I think he said, were from like a Brown. They looked top, they were someplace in a village in India, or a village in China, or a village in, who knows, in someplace in Eastern Europe, right? Just amazing what can happen. So there are going to be new ways. And I do think, by the way, having 4 walls in an institution like Brown and incorporating new big data learning methods are going to change the world. And it'll change what's happening at Brown too, and I think Brown has an opportunity to get on top of it and be a real leader here. So just ending with one word on EMC. I went to this, and I didn't want to make this any kind of, but EMC, as Robbie said, we have a set of companies. We have Pivotal, which is focused pretty much on what's happening in big data, and building out a cloud foundry, which is the way to develop developers pass, which has got a new way of interfacing with the cloud. It's kind of an OS for the cloud, which is open sourced, which IBM and HP and AT&T and Verizon and a whole set of companies have come behind. They're working on a new data fabric, which is how you process all this big data. And then, of course, they're working on new ways of building applications faster, agilely. Second company in our Kretsu is VMware, which is taking the powers of virtualization and applying it to the other elements in a data stack, and bringing a software-defined data center and working on some of the problems around mobile and end-user computing, which will help with bringing hybrid computing, which is private and public clouds working together. The core of EMC is working on information storage and protection, software-defined storage techniques, information intelligence, and also converged infrastructure, bringing storage, compute, and networking together. We're doing a lot of that with our partner, Cisco. And then in RSA, we're doing identity protection and verification. Using big data is how do we assume the bad guys have penetrated your firewalls and are in your system. And what it basically does is build a profile for every single user, looks at every packet of flow, and if it sees packet flow that looks out of the norm, it'll either slow it down and ask more questions or stop it, period. So basically, it is using the underlying, it actually uses Pivotal systems inside that. And then, of course, assuring that our governance, risk, and compliance metrics around security are good. So in other words, we have good governance, we are mitigating risk, and we're compliant with the rules that we've set up or the nations of the world have set up for us. So that's kind of what we do inside the EMC family. I will die being a relentless recruiter. So We'd love to work closer with Brown and your faculty, and with Ravi and your team. And then, of course, everybody that's a brilliant student, we'd love to have you come and be part of the family. So thank you so much for having me here today. And I think hopefully we have a little time for Q&A. But thank you so much. I appreciate it. Ravi's going to come up and incent you to ask questions.
I just wanted to mention, since Joe mentioned it's being recorded and streamed, so if you have any questions, if you will use one of the 2 microphones, please. So go ahead. Joe is open for questions from anyone. And be sure to introduce yourself. So.
Hi, I'm Matt. I'm a freshman here. I was wondering how you...
4 years, Matt, EMC.
I was wondering how you think we can reconcile our desire for privacy with our desire for smarter software and better products that need all our data? Or do we need to re-examine our philosophies on what privacy is and means?
You know, it's so hard. I'd imagine just knowing you're on Facebook, Instagram, right? So you are much more willing, right, to share data than probably I am. And you are not wrong, and I am not right, and I am not right, and you are not wrong. So part of it is just where are you comfortable? And then I think in times in life, you'll change some of your opinions, right? One way or the other, right? So privacy is that's why I said it's a much tougher thing to define. Whereas security, that was mine and you took it without my permission. But I do think the key to it's going to be, it's going to be more of an opt-in, like I talked about with the progressive example, right? It's to get your data, I should obtain your permission, and we have to have enough security applied to that, so that if I don't obtain your permission, right, then I can't possibly, you know, get to your information, and then you're say, hey, I got privacy, and that's not going to solve everything, and then there's different things like, you know, the German Worker Council saying you can't take my data by law outside of Germany. So therefore, I can't take your data out of Germany and store it in a US data center or a UK data center or an Austrian data center, which is right next door. Right? I need that in Germany. So there's going to be governments getting involved here. There's going to be people's wills and tolerances and beliefs that are going to get in here. It's going to be one of the stickiest problems to solve, much harder to solve, my opinion. I don't know what my learned friends here in computer science think, but I think it's a much harder problem to solve than is security. But again, they are first cousins. And I'll give you an example. Like a lot of the traditional stores, you know, we've all shopped, everybody shopped on Amazon? Yes? All right, so you shopped on Amazon? So the second you get on Amazon, they know who you are, and what do they start doing? Suggesting products to you, right? Because they know you're shopping. Very quickly, as soon as you do your first search, they'll know what you're shopping for, and they'll suggest things that you're looking for, things that are around what you're looking for, maybe things that you're not looking for, right? And it's a pretty cool experience. And now, you went into where do you shop? Targets, maybe? Targets. Now, you go into a Target or any store like that. When's the first time they know that you're there? You think so? Yeah, but they don't. First time they really know you're there today with their current systems is when you're checking out. When they swiped your credit card. And they say, ah, you're here. And they highly unlikely that they'll say, hey, I know you like, I don't know, Frisbees. I know you like a certain brand of Frisbees. They're on sale. You say, hey, great, I'll go back out of line. I'll go get one. You know, you're not going to do it. Now, let's have another experience. I'm not being see, yours was too evasive. You're back to privacy. You're saying, he said, put a camera in the parking lot and facial recognition. Here you go. To me, I don't like that. How many people think that's okay to do? Any? You don't even think it's okay to do. You should at least raise your hand. But there was one person who thought it was okay to do. There you go. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right? But most people didn't. So here's the thing on privacy, right? Now, how about if you opted in and you said, hey, when I give you permission, Target or wherever you're shopping, that when I walk in the door, you can recognize Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, you can recognize that it's me. I'll have my smartphone in my hand, right? And then you know I'm here. And I might be able to enter what I'm looking for. And now I can help you, guide you through the aisles. I can throw promotions at you, and I can say, hey, I happen to know you also like Crest toothpaste. There's a sale on that in aisle 4. Right? Now, he wouldn't object to that, right? Anybody would object to that? If you opted in. One person objects to that. See? I tell you, this privacy is never going to be solved. But again, I think that's where it's going to go. You're going to say, I am okay with this, but if I'm not okay with this, you can't have it. So you can go all the way from they could recognize your face without your permission in the parking lot, and then know you are, which very few people agree to. And then you can go all the way to, with your permission, suggest things to me and give me coupons, which one person in the back disagreed to. And I'm not saying anybody's right or wrong, I'm just saying that's the whole thing. So I just used an example that's really happening in real life, by the way. These tests are in progress.
Thank you.
In a lot of settings, it seems like
you got to tell me your name. How am I going to recruit you, Ben?
My name's Ben. I'm studying computational biology. In a lot of settings, we already have a lot of big data. You show the graphs on those 8s, and specifically the worst one, the incarcerated. But no one seems to be doing anything about it. Governments aren't changing. They're not making this better. So how do you get governments or even companies to recognize the data that's out there and get them to adapt their policies to make things better?
Churchill had the greatest saying in life, right? He said, you can always count on the U.S. to do the right thing after they exhaust all other options. Right? And maybe you can paraphrase that. When those lines get far enough apart and tax dollars are huge amounts to pay for those things, right, then maybe we'll do the right thing. And what I was suggesting and trying to incent Brown, because it's just, you're in a special place, what I try to do, some of my give back, and so what we try to do with some of our philanthropy within the companies, how do we try to bend those curves early before it becomes a complete disaster? Because if those curves separate too much, the results are going to be horrendous, right? So you're right, and they're all in a way connected, because especially education, right? If we educate properly, right, and say what's the future going to look like, and how do we create the kind of jobs we're going to need? So in our industry, for instance, we have more jobs. Our industry, we do okay, but our industry, struggles. It's a seller's market, right? I mean, if we want to hire you, you're in a good spot, right? In other industries, it's completely a buyer's market, right? So how do we basically say, here's where the world's going, how do we educate better? How do we re-educate? How do we make midlife careers better? I mean, you're working on that. I spoke to some of your people today. Karen, you're working on that. So, when will we address these issues? I think they're all being thought about. Healthcare is very unfortunately tied to privacy. We could do a lot. There's a lot of data out there that if we applied this data, we can cut the cost of healthcare significantly, use information technology. It's the worst user of technology. I think that's probably the easiest one to fix, but got the most kind of antibodies against fixing it. Education, I think this online education blended could bend the curve. And again, if you do a good enough job in education, we create jobs, there'll be less incarceration. But there's no silver bullet, but bright guys like you will figure it out.
Hi, Mason.
What's your first name?
Mason.
Mason, how are you? What year are you in?
Junior.
Junior, only 2 years for you.
Yeah. Give me an internship.
What did he say? What's that? There you go. See me in the back. I accept challenges.
So what kind of role do you think artificial intelligence and machine learning will have in the coming years for big data analytics?
It's huge. I mean, basically, IBM talks a lot about Watson. which is kind of one technique. You know, there's crowdsourcing. There's a million techniques around how I can use more reasoning coming from using the information itself and algorithms I wrote on top of that information to mine that information better, faster. I just think the data itself, if you don't apply these kinds of technologies, you'll never get through it. These data sets are too big. You know, most of the credit for this has got to go to Google, right? If you think of what Google did when they were a startup, this is a small startup now, not Google that you know. Just think Google startup. And their business plan was, I'm going to index all the data on the World Wide Web so I can search it. Pretty bold business plan. And of course, if you're going to do that, and you had to stuff it in a database, right? That would have been pretty difficult to do and incredibly expensive. So basically, they had to reinvent how to handle this amount of data, which is, and they didn't invent Hadoop, but they took it to a new level and map-reduced technologies and NoSQL, and they did a lot of different kinds of work, and they are mining over a lot of information at much lower prices. You know, fortunately, these brilliant people wrote a lot of white papers. Smart people can't help themselves. They got to write white papers. And the world has read those white papers, and they're now bringing these same technologies, what we're doing with Pivotal, bringing these same technologies into the business world, so to speak. And of course, with that, if you got that amount of data, people can't go through it. You got to have all forms of different artificial intelligence algorithms, whatever you want to call it, to mine through this data, because I want to get you in the act of doing something. That's the Holy Grail. And not only you, a machine in the act. You know, it could be a jet engine, right? I want to catch it in the act, and I want to alter it, hopefully, that you say, this is good. This is a good experience. I'll pay for that. That's what you want to do as a company. If you're an airplane engine, I'll alter it to get better fuel economy without slowing the plane down. That gives you economics, right? So that's where it is. And so it's going to be huge. Huge. Is that your specialty? Yeah. Now you're really going to get an internship. See me in the back. Are you smart? I should have asked that first before I offered you an internship. I think you are. You look smart.
Hi, my name is Michael. I'm a sophomore, and I would like you to elaborate more on unstructured data.
Yep.
Like, what kind of tools are you guys using to bring structure and organize this unstructured data? Or like, what are your plans for making sense of unstructured data?
Well, that's kind of what these technologies are doing, right? When they did the the HDFS and Hadoop, they didn't build it to work only with structured, because they knew most of this index that they had to, the index and data that they had to search in the world was going to be unstructured, right? So it was built that it's not reliant. I mean, basically the premise of a database is all around rows and columns. And for years we added up rows really well, and then they figured out, let's add up columns, and then somebody came up with a brilliant idea, I could do rows and columns, right? Which is kind of where we are today, right? And of course, this is a, you probably know more about it than I know about it, but this is a whole different way of how I can work with information, and it really matters not to that new construct, whether it's structured or unstructured. And of course, my statistics are right. It's almost 85% of data is unstructured today, of the bit. If you go down to the byte level, bit level, and therefore people are saving it. It must have value to somebody. And then people must think they can derive even more value from it. And how do you do that? And what are the new techniques going to be? Are they going to be artificial intelligence? Is there going to be crowdsourcing? Is there going to be all these other techniques that are being developed? That's what you're going to figure out here at Brown.
Probably not.
You're not going to figure any of it out?
I'm not towards
What's your thing?
I'm more towards business.
That's good. The world needs that too. So you guys, you got to meet him. You want my job?
Maybe that'd be nice.
Okay. I remember the days where everybody wanted to be a CEO. Now nobody wants to be a CEO. I don't know. I don't know what happened there.
Hi, I'm Sasha. I'm a sophomore. And coming from the education perspective, I need to concentrate in mechanical engineering. And oftentimes in our education curriculum, we don't really learn how to deal with big data, but clearly in our real-world applications, like as you explained, like engines have sensors that we collect data from. And in simply learning about mechanics, but how to better incorporate the use of data into our engineering.
Now, you're a mechanical engineer, you said? Yeah, well, first of all, there's going to be hardware for a long, long time, because most software runs on hardware, right? So there's a lot of opportunity for what you, you know, kind of where you're coming from. And you're right. I mean, where sensors are going to go and how they're going to be used and how they're going to change businesses and how they're going to, you know, the betterment of almost every industry is going to be an amazing area. And you're right in the heart of it, right? But I think engineering is just, what I would focus on if I was your age is how's this world going to change? And how can I be part of it, right? I mean, I talked about some of it, and you could come up with more examples like, and how am I going to be part of it? You know, think out there. Don't think backwards. Think forward. And you know, what's it going to be like? And what do you like doing, right? My one advice to any student would be, do what you like doing. If you don't like it, I would say, and you're as smart as you guys are, because if you got into Brown, you're smart. If you're teaching at Brown, you're smart. If you're on a faculty here or you're in the administration, you're smart. So you can do what you want. So might as well, my advice is do what you like. And then my advice would be try to make a difference in something, right? In other people's lives, in how you think things should be. And you're gonna have a great future. And you got a great smile, so everybody's gonna like you.
Hi, I'm Tucci. I'm a master's student in computer science. So I'm a big fan of open source. I also heard that you mentioned Pivotal is open source, all of those things. So I'm wondering, like, what is your EMC's attitude towards open source, and how you see open source as the future?
Well, it's becoming a bigger and bigger piece of the future. So there's a lot of things we do. Probably the biggest thing we've contributed to open source is Cloud Foundry, which is getting a tremendous following. We have at least 10 other projects behind that, which we will open source. The other thing I will tell you is it's unproven that you can make a lot of, you can make enough money to sustain a company just if you open source. You need to have some technologies that you can charge for, right? I mean, it's just the principle of economics. So it's a blend of how do you seed what you want to do and how do you make things better and change the industry, and that's your give back. And then also, where's my IP going to be, and how do I make profit? Because I have 67,000 employees. I have I don't know how many shareholders. I should probably, but I don't. But I know we got over 2 billion shares outstanding, and that's not 2 billion shareholders, but there's 2 billion shares held by 100,000 shareholders. I have no idea what I should know. I could probably find out the number, but it never wasn't. That particular number is not important, but it is that I have 2 billion shares that people own, and they want to get a decent return. So I got to make sure we make profit, and that's how you hire people. We invest 12% of our revenues in R&D. 12%. We take another 10% of our revenues and we buy technology companies. So, it takes a lot of money to run a business and create value. And so the blend is, how do I use open source a lot, but then how do I create some of my own IP, and how do I blend them together to give you a better experience, and you being a proxy for every business, every educational institution, every government, et cetera, every enterprise in the world of any different size. And that's kind of what I got to deal with. So it's not all open source. It's not no open source. It's how do I do both. So hopefully you'll have that attitude with your brain.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Uh-oh.
Nice talk.
You said you were going to be nice to me.
I'll be nice. Computer science. I have 2 questions. The first one is, I was wondering if you can give us some idea about what the impact of the Snowden NSA fallout was on the cloud computing industry.
The biggest problem with the Snowden NSA, it's kind of there's like a tip of the iceberg, and you all know about the tip of the iceberg. And what I assume, and I won't tell you what I know, but what I assume, what everybody assumes, is people trying to protect all of us in this room obviously went too far. where the damage it did to the cloud computing industry, and maybe even the internet itself, is, you know, this was, in the world, eyes of the world, maybe too much a US phenomena. Right? Most of the leading technology companies are here. So it gave reason to why I'm going to put up these protective walls. So why does my data's got to stay in my country or my province? And that's kind of the bottom of the iceberg that you don't see, that's going to slow down knowledge for man and maybe the pace of our progression in productivity and what we could do as a world. That part is very, very sad to see. But again, you know, in the law of Nietzsche, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I think the industry itself, I think our government itself, at least I hope, we as individuals learned and will get stronger from it, and ultimately good will come from it. Even though I'm not condoning the acts itself, but you know, either what he did or what the NSA did, but I'm just saying, those are just some thoughts around the process.
I have another question. You talked about data science a little bit, and then we heard questions about the importance of education, data-oriented education. So data science now sits at the intersection of multiple traditional disciplines, things like computer science, applied math, and some domain fields. Do you think it deserves its own discipline going forward? In other words, should we start to think about the data science department?
I think part of me thinks yes and part of me thinks no. And let me tell you why. I mean, there's going to be people down here that are just the pure experts on how to deal with data. But the more valuable people will be people that understand that and how to apply it to a business problem, to an industry, right? So if we just have too horizontal, then there's going to be, I have to explain to you what I want to do for what I'm doing for a living, and then we have to reach it. Whereas if we have more interdisciplinary work, I can understand a technology like an engine or like an oil drilling platform, and then I also am pretty steeped in big data technologies. I might be better able to put that together. So I think it's really both, and I think the way you do your programs here, I think is smart. I think of all universities, you have one of the more open approaches to building your own curriculum, and I think that builds more this interdisciplinary, and I applaud that. And I think that data science has to end up like that. So if I had a vote, I'd say to interdiscipline. But that doesn't mean you can't have some purists in here, because there's a lot of technology that needs to get built down here. So I'd say, you know, maybe 80-20 rule, 20% this way, you know, excuse me, 20% this way, deepen the science of data science, and 80% this way that can solve real business problems in real industries and for real people. I don't know if you agree or not, but. Hi.
Hi, I'm Amanda. I work in CIS. I'm a staff member.
Hi, Amanda.
Hi. The picture of all the robots really scares me.
They wore red like you.
And your chart showing education, higher ed, how much that costs. It seems like education is a common good for everyone, and I recently read a study about how a lot of companies are unwilling to invest in that common good. And of course, I tried to use my smartphone to be able to quote which article that was, but what do you see as your role to help all of those people that aren't here at Brown, that you aren't actively recruiting to meet you in the back of the room? How can you and the other companies help all of those other people that are being left behind?
Personally, right? I think to be fulfilled as an individual, you need to give back. It's kind of the spiritual side of it, right? And I've chosen my field to be education. And it's where I get involved, give back, where I, both personal time, which is at this stage harder for me to give than money, but you know, yes money, but yes more time. I try to do both, not more time, but probably more money than time, but I try to give back there, because I think if I try to spread myself, or anybody tries to spread themselves too thin, you won't have the same impact, or if you just say, this is something I'm going to try to improve, and use your position, your financial position, your position as CEO of a pretty successful company, and then you get the company behind it too, to say, what can we do? You know, one of the things that I'm most proud of is we have a tremendous number of people that came to us, started working in our factories, and then using programs that we have, went and got a degree, and then we have an on-site MBA program. We graduate about 40 students, 40 of our people a year. So we have a tremendous number. Our friend there's going to see me in the back. We do a great intern program. We support a grammar school, Catholic grammar school, which, by the way, has only 30% Catholics in it. It's really an inner city school, which is really helping kids that want to learn in a very tough area. So there's a whole raft of things. I can go on and on. Our people, the thing I'm most proud of is the amount of personal time that individuals throughout the organization give to help those in need. Tremendously great heart, and you can tell the soul of a company that you guys might want to join is what's its soul, and how does it care about its communities it lives in and the people that are less fortunate, and I'm very proud of our heritage there. So I could go on and on and on, but those are some of the things. But you know, pick an area and try to make what difference can I make in anything? You know, tiny. But that tiny thing multiplied by 100 people do it, 200 people do it, 1,000 people do it. And the area I picked to give back is education. Do I care about medicine? Yep. Do I care about a lot of other things? Sure. But the one area I've kind of focused in is education as my personal give back. Thank you. I'm getting the hook.
No, actually, Joe can stay on. We have a reception immediately following this, so you'll have a chance to continue the dialogue. But there are a few people I want to recognize before we wrap this up. I definitely want to acknowledge the event management and facilities folks who did an amazing job helping put this event together. The folks in our media technologies, Ron Dunleavy and his crew, just amazing work as always. And I want to definitely acknowledge Wendy, my assistant, who kind of keeps me alive and does amazing things. So thank you, Wendy, for doing that. And last but not the least, the faculty member and the leadership who is here. Larry, I see Larry there, Larry Larson, Dean of Engineering, Shriram Ur. I saw Andy Van Dam come in some point. I'm not sure where he is, but he's back right there. Okay, he's over there. I see John Savage. So thank you so much for all your help putting this together. As you know, this series will continue, and we hope to bring other wonderful speakers as well. Joe was phenomenal. Joe, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And as a token of appreciation, we do have a small gift for Joe. Joe, thank you.
Well, thank you, Ravi. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much.
I wish you all the best.